Who are you and why are you in my boardroom? The voice was calm, but razor sharp. Isabel froze in the doorway, clutching her tote bag like a shield. Her heart thudded. Every suited executive turned to look. I, I'm so sorry. I must have taken a wrong turn. I didn't mean to. Her voice cracked. She turned to flee, brushing her blonde hair across her cheek to hide the faint scar beneath her eye. One wrong door, one accidental step into a CEO boardroom. She was just a scared intern. But when she turned to leave, he noticed her scar and didn't look away. In a room full of executives, he didn't just see the mistake. He saw the story behind her silence. That's when everything began to change. Isabel worked quietly, often in the background, the way she'd taught herself to survive. She never drew attention to her presence, never lingered too long in common areas, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. But despite her efforts to remain invisible, her actions spoke louder than any words. Each morning, she arrived early, earlier than anyone else. She arranged files left crooked by hurried hands the day before. She watered the plants even though no one had asked her to. And when the older receptionist, Mrs. Benton, struggled with a load of printed reports, Isabel was always the first to leap to her side, lifting the heavy binders with a soft, "Let me help you." Mrs. Benton, nearing retirement and often overlooked in the fast-paced, high-powered office, would smile gratefully. "You've got magic hands, Isabel," she'd whisper one morning. "Thank you." Isabel blushed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, careful as always to keep her left cheek turned slightly away. The scar that ran just beneath her eye had faded over the years, but it still drew stares when she forgot to hide it. It was the kind of mark that made people assume things. Accidents, abuse, something tragic. And most of the time, people pretended not to see it, or worse, looked away. But that morning, everything shifted, without her knowing it. CEO Nathan Hale had returned to the office early from a client meeting, his steps quiet as he took the executive elevator to his floor. He liked moving through the company unnoticed sometimes, observing what his polished boardroom never showed him. And from around the corner of the hallway, he saw her. She wasn't in a tailored suit or heels. She didn't bark orders or carry herself like she belonged. She was kneeling beside Mrs. Benton, adjusting the straps of a box that was clearly too heavy for the older woman to carry alone. Isabel's expression was gentle, thoughtful, focused entirely on helping. Nathan paused. There were 1,000 faces in his company, but hers was new. He didn't recognize her from orientation, and something about her quiet kindness stopped him in his tracks. He waited until she stood. Then with a calm voice he asked, "What's your name?" Isabel turned quickly, startled. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw him. Clean cut, striking in his navy suit, the CEO himself. She panicked for a moment, heart hammering. Did she do something wrong? Was she in a restricted area? "Isabel," she said softly. "Isabel Moore." Nathan didn't respond immediately. His gaze lingered, not unkindly on her face. For a moment, her hand instinctively lifted to brush her cheek, fingers hovering near the faint scar. She waited for him to glance away, like everyone else did, but he didn't. Instead, he said, "Thank you, Isabel. That was very considerate of you." It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, genuinely, without patronizing tone or disinterest. And then he nodded once before continuing on down the hallway, briefcase in hand. Isabel stood frozen for a moment, her breath caught in her chest. That was the first time in years someone had seen her, not just looked at her. From that moment on, Nathan began to notice her more. It wasn't deliberate at first, but she was always there, tidying the copy room, staying late to help another intern finish a report, offering tissues to the young man who'd just been scolded by his manager. Her presence was like a steady hum of calm in a chaotic office. Nathan found himself pausing at the glass window of the intern bullpen longer than necessary. His assistant began to notice. His colleagues teased him about being distracted lately, but he shrugged it off. He didn't quite understand it himself. Why someone so quiet, so seemingly ordinary, had managed to lodge herself in his mind. And Isabel, though unaware at first, began to feel something shift. People smiled at her more. Managers nodded in appreciation. She was invited to a lunch meeting not because of her looks, not because someone pitied her, but because her work ethic had become undeniable. Still, it was Nathan's gaze that lingered the longest. It wasn't about the scar. Not to him. It was about the girl who moved through shadows with grace, who carried burdens that didn't belong to her, and who, without knowing it, had begun to change the rhythm of his days. And for the first time in a very long time, Isabel felt seen. The boardroom buzzed with anticipation. It was one of the biggest marketing meetings of the quarter. Executives gathered, department heads aligned, and everyone sat a little straighter, knowing Nathan Hale himself was presiding. Isabel sat near the end of the table, not even supposed to be there. She had been shadowing a mid-level marketing manager as part of her internship rotation. She was expected to observe, take notes, and most importantly, stay quiet. But something inside her had changed over the past few weeks. Maybe it was the way Nathan had asked her name that day in the hallway, or how he began nodding to her in passing, like she mattered. Maybe it was the quiet encouragement from Mrs. Benton, or perhaps it was something deeper, something long buried that was finally brave enough to rise. As the head of marketing scrolled through slides packed with images of sleek models, glossy ad layouts, and polished campaign buzzwords, Isabel's gaze tightened. She had seen this all before, just like everyone else had. But it didn't speak to people like her. It didn't reflect the company's diverse customer base. It wasn't real. Then came the open question. "We're looking for feedback," the senior VP said half-heartedly. "Any thoughts?" Silence. A few polite nods. A safe comment about fonts. And then, Isabel's hand rose. It surprised even her. Heads turned, some with confusion, others with skepticism. The VP's brow arched. "Yes, Isabel, right?" She nodded, her voice trembling slightly at first. I just, I noticed that the campaign doesn't include any representation of older adults, people with disabilities, or ethnic minorities. Our brand says we care about everyone, but the ads don't reflect that." A pause blanketed the room like a held breath. Someone coughed. She continued, gaining strength. "I've been helping gather customer feedback in the support center. Many people actually mention this. They feel excluded, invisible. And I ran a small report last night. If you look at this," she slid a paper forward, "there's a 23% drop in engagement from users over 50, and nearly 18% drop in conversion rates among multicultural demographics over the last 2 quarters." The room was stunned. Nathan leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "You compiled this data yourself?" She nodded. "Yes, sir, just on my own time. I wanted to understand what was missing." One executive gave a scoff under his breath. Another leaned toward his colleague and whispered, clearly unimpressed. Isabel saw it, but didn't let it derail her. Not this time. Nathan didn't look away. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Thank you, Isabel. That's insightful." The head of marketing forced a smile. "We were planning to diversify in the next round, of course." "But why not now?" Isabel asked gently. "Why wait to be authentic?" Nathan sat back, silent for a long moment. Then he tapped his finger once on the table. "Let's run with Isabel's findings. I want her to be involved in the next campaign's direction." A murmur spread through the room. Not all of it kind. "But she's an intern," someone finally said aloud. Nathan turned to the voice. "A perceptive one. And right now, this brand could use more perception and less repetition." Isabel's heart thundered, but this time, not from fear, from disbelief. Was this really happening? "Yes, Mr. Hale," she said, her voice steady. After the meeting, whispers followed her down the hallway. Some were supportive, others sharp with envy. "She just embarrassed the whole department," one voice hissed. "She's only been here 6 weeks." But others noticed something else. How Nathan had listened, really listened, and how he left the meeting without a word of praise to anyone else but her. By the end of the day, Isabel's inbox held a formal invite from the brand strategy division. She was to be the lead intern on a real campaign, not a side observer, a contributor. She stared at the screen in disbelief. The girl who once hid behind her tote bag had just changed the course of a billion-dollar brand's next step. And for the first time in her life, she had spoken not just for herself, but for everyone who never got a seat at the table. With her promotion to project contributor, Isabel's world shifted. But so did the way people looked at her. At first it was subtle, sideways glances, conversations that stopped when she entered the break room. Polite nods replaced by tight-lipped silence. Then came the whispers. She had just finished a long call with a vendor when she walked past the kitchenette and froze. Inside, Ava and Derek, two marketing associates, were huddled near the counter, laughing in hushed voices. They hadn't seen her yet. Unbelievable, Ava muttered, flipping through mock-ups. She walks around like she owns the place now, all because Nathan's watching her. Derek snorted. He's not watching her. He's watching her scar. You've seen the way he looks at her, like some kind of tragic charity case. Please, Ava replied, rolling her eyes. That's not sympathy. That's strategy. Make the intern feel special so the board thinks he's a progressive leader. It's classic PR. Isabel's breath caught in her throat. Honestly, Derek added, lowering his voice even more, she's not even that smart. Just damaged. Scarred and scared must be the new office chic. Laughter. Ice in her chest. She turned away before they noticed her, blinking back the sting in her eyes as she fled down the hall. She didn't cry. Not yet. But that night she sat alone at her desk long after everyone had left. Her screen glowed against the darkness. Numbers swam on her spreadsheets. Her eyes burned. All she could hear was Ava's voice repeating in her head, "Scarred and scared." She reached for her bag and opened her laptop again, not to work, but to draft an email. Subject, resignation. Her fingers hovered above the keys. Was it worth it? She had come so far, spoken up, been trusted. But in that moment, she didn't feel powerful. She felt exposed and exhausted. Her head began to spin. She reached for her water, missed. The floor seemed to tilt. The sound of her keyboard tapping faded. Her vision dimmed, and then everything went black. The security guard found her collapsed on the carpet near the printer, her breathing shallow. A call was made, and within minutes, Nathan Hale was racing down the corridor like a storm. He didn't wait for protocol, didn't bark orders. He simply bent down, gently lifted her into his arms, and carried her, down 2 floors, to the executive wellness room. The nurses were startled but sprang into action. Nathan placed her gently on the cot, brushed a strand of damp hair from her forehead, and whispered, "You're okay. Just rest." The nurse checked her vitals. "She's dehydrated, overworked, no signs of serious illness, just sheer exhaustion." Nathan sat beside her, staring at her pale face. Guilt tightened in his chest. He'd seen her pushing too hard. He'd passed her desk and noted the late hours. Why hadn't he stopped her? Before he left the room, he made 2 quiet requests. One, to the kitchen. Please prepare a bowl of warm congee, plain, gentle on the stomach. And 2, to himself. He pulled a notebook from his coat pocket, tore out a clean page and wrote, "Take care of yourself. You matter. N." He folded the note, placed it beside the steaming bowl, and turned off the light. As he closed the door, he looked back once, then walked away. Isabel woke before dawn. The room was dim and quiet. She sat up slowly, disoriented, a blanket tucked neatly around her. Then she saw it, the note, the bowl of porridge, still warm. Her breath hitched. She picked up the folded paper and read the words over and over, as if they might vanish. You matter. No one had ever said that to her, not her teachers, not her foster parents, not her old friends, only him. She held the note to her chest, eyes brimming, her walls cracking open in the silence. Then slowly she reached for the bowl and took a spoonful. It was soft, mild, comforting. And in that small, quiet moment, she felt seen. Isabel could have walked away. After the collapse, after the cruel words, after writing her resignation and nearly pressing send. But something in her had shifted, something quiet but immovable. It wasn't just the note Nathan had left. It was the way he'd written it. He didn't say, "You'll be okay." He said, "You matter." No one had ever said that and meant it, and that alone became the anchor that steadied her. So instead of quitting, Isabel returned to work the next day, not with fire, but with quiet resolve. She didn't need to prove herself anymore. She had already been seen. Nathan didn't speak much when he passed her desk, but every once in a while, their eyes met. And in those silent exchanges, there was a quiet understanding. You don't have to rush, just rise. A week later, an opportunity arrived. The board had approved a new corporate social responsibility initiative, and Nathan wanted something different, something meaningful. We don't need another checkbook campaign, he said in a meeting. We need something that lives, breathes, and heals. Isabel, still recovering her strength, raised her hand. I have an idea, she said softly. She spoke of her own experience as a burn survivor, of the years she spent hiding, of the shame that wasn't her fault. She talked about kids like her, those growing up with visible scars and invisible wounds. What if we built something for them, she asked. Not just money, but hope, access, visibility, belonging. A long silence followed. Then Nathan said, You'll lead it. She blinked. I'm just an intern. Not anymore, he replied. And so Shine Forward Fund was born. It began with Isabel gathering stories, letters, drawings, and video calls with young burn survivors across the country. She partnered with nonprofits, therapists, hospitals. She created not just a scholarship program, but a full initiative, mentorship, art therapy, public speaking support, digital literacy workshops. She worked late, but this time, not out of fear, out of purpose. Her scar wasn't hidden anymore. In fact, she stopped covering it. It became her quiet badge of survival. The campaign launch was scheduled for the following month, an evening gala hosted at the company's headquarters. And as the day approached, Isabel practiced her speech over and over, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to get it right for the kids who'd be watching. The night of the event arrived. The auditorium sparkled with lights. Rows of employees, families, partners, and community leaders filled the space. Children with bandaged arms and glowing smiles sat in the front row, swinging their legs in little dress shoes. Backstage, Isabel paced, holding her note cards close. Nathan stepped beside her, adjusting his tie. Remember, he said softly, you're not speaking to impress them. You're speaking for them. She nodded, breath shallow but steady. The lights dimmed. Her name was called. Isabel stepped onto the stage. For a moment, the room blurred. Then she saw them, those kids, and everything settled. She began. Good evening. My name is Isabel Moore, and for most of my life, I thought my scar made me less. I thought I had to hide, to stay quiet. But someone looked at me, really looked, and said I mattered. That changed everything. She told them about Shine Forward Fund, about children who would now have resources, scholarships, mentors, about programs that didn't erase their scars, but helped them own their stories. And then she said, this isn't about making them perfect. It's about helping them shine as they already are. When she finished, the room stood. Applause rose like thunder. Tears shimmered in the corners of many eyes. Some clapped. Some held their children closer. Nathan stepped forward. He didn't approach the microphone right away. Instead, he turned to Isabel. Then he turned to the crowd and said, she's not just an intern. She's the heart of this mission. The applause grew louder, and for once, Isabel didn't lower her head. She stood tall with the scar on her cheek visible under the spotlight, and smiled. It was the kind of smile born not of victory, but of arrival. She had made it, and she had brought others with her. The grand ballroom glowed under golden lights as Isabel finished her speech, her final words still echoing in the air. I never needed to be perfect. I only needed to be seen. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Some clapped through tears. Others simply stood in still admiration. Isabel stepped back from the podium, heart pounding, not from nerves, but from something deeper. Release, relief, pride. Nathan stood nearby, watching her not with awe, but with recognition. A photographer called out, one photo, please. Miss Moore and Mr. Hale? Isabel turned and Nathan approached her gently, his expression calm. In front of the crowd, cameras, and media lenses, he reached up, brushing a strand of hair away from her cheek, revealing the faded scar beneath her eye. Then quietly and with reverence, he leaned forward and kissed the scar. The ballroom fell into hushed stillness. A single flash, one photograph. That image went viral within hours. CEO honors her scar blazed across headlines. The kiss wasn't romantic. It was respectful, symbolic, powerful. It wasn't about perfection. It was about acceptance. People across the world shared their own scars, their stories. The hashtag #SeeNotPerfect trended globally. Survivors wrote in. Parents thanked the Shine Forward Fund. Isabel's inbox flooded with messages from people who had never felt seen until now. But Isabel and Nathan didn't bask in the attention. They returned to their work, to their mission. Their relationship, while quietly growing, remained private. There were no public declarations. No office gossip could define it, because what they shared was built not on display, but on something far more rare: understanding, respect, trust. And in a world obsessed with the flawless, Isabel's scar became a symbol of something far stronger: truth and the quiet power of being seen. A full year had passed since the night Isabel's scar became a symbol of strength. Much had changed. Isabel Moore was no longer the quiet intern tucked in the corner of a boardroom. She was now the director of global outreach for the Shine Forward Foundation, leading international programs that empowered young burn survivors around the world. But what had changed most wasn't her title. It was how she carried herself. Gone was the nervous posture, the instinct to hide, the voice that once trembled. Isabel stood tall now. Her scar was still there, visible, unchanged. But it no longer defined her. It belonged to her story, yes, but it no longer held her back. She had learned that true leadership wasn't about being flawless. It was about being honest, brave, and deeply human. That evening, the foundation hosted its annual gala, now an international event drawing attention from health organizations, educational institutions, and philanthropists from around the globe. This year's theme, Bridge to Purpose. Isabel stepped onto the stage in a midnight blue gown, her scar softly lit by the golden spotlights. The room fell silent. With every story shared, every child seen, we've built something powerful together, she began. But our work isn't finished. Healing doesn't stop at survival. It moves forward into purpose. She took a breath and announced the foundation's latest milestone: a new vocational scholarship program for teenagers with burn injuries, offering training in digital media, engineering, culinary arts, and more. Cheers erupted, followed by a standing ovation. From the back of the room, Nathan Hale stood quietly, hands in his pockets, his gaze soft as he watched her command the room. He hadn't said a word during the ceremony, hadn't needed to, because everything he could have said was already shining from the woman on that stage. Later that night, as the music slowed and the crowd began to mingle, Isabel found him waiting by the edge of the terrace doors. "You were extraordinary," Nathan said gently. "You believed in me before I believed in myself," she replied. He shook his head. "No, I just saw what was already there." Then, without a word more, he offered his hand. She took it. Together they stepped onto the balcony, into the soft hush of the night. Below them the city sparkled, alive, vibrant, unbothered by flaws or scars. The air was cool, but their fingers stayed intertwined, steady and quiet. No speeches, no confessions, no declarations. Just a shared silence between two people who had walked through fire, one literally, one emotionally, and found peace not in perfection, but in seeing and being seen. Nathan looked at her, his voice quiet. "You're the light that shows others the way." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her eyes said everything. And in that moment, without fanfare, without a crowd, they simply stood together in stillness, knowing the work would continue, the mission would grow, and the world would always need more stories like theirs. Sometimes the deepest stories are the quietest ones, the ones carried in scars we try to hide, in glances that go unnoticed, in voices that learn to whisper because the world seems too loud to listen. Isabel's journey reminds us of a truth many forget in today's image-obsessed society. You don't have to be flawless to be worthy. In a world that values polish over presence, her story shines because it's real. And isn't that something we all long for, especially as we grow older? To be seen, to be valued not due to our wounds, but because of how far we've come carrying them. Nathan didn't save her, He saw her, and sometimes that's all it takes to begin again. In today's workplaces, families, and friendships, how often do we overlook those who hide in plain sight? What would happen if we simply paused and really saw someone? We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever carried a scar no one saw? Has someone ever changed your life just by noticing you? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be the light someone else needs today. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to follow more heartfelt journeys from Warm Soul Stories. Because sometimes, you never needed to be perfect. You only needed to be seen. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the world needs more of right now.